Michael J. Murphy was a really interesting filmmaker. He's a filmmaker who worked in a lot of different genres. He worked primarily in the horror, sci-fi, fantastic films, sword and sorcerer, thriller, post-apocalyptic, science fiction, those types of genres, those types of films. And he was like a serial filmmaker. He made films over the course of 50 years. He started making movies when he was a young kid, and he got an internship at Elstree Studios, and then he kind of moved off and started making movies on his own. And throughout his life, he was like this serial filmmaker. He would just find the money to get the Super 8 or 16 millimeter stock. He'd get these people together, and he would just shoot these incredible movies. And he's got dozens and dozens of feature film credits on the IMDb. Up until a few years ago, a lot of those credits were not on the IMDb. Up until a few years ago, these films were like, you couldn't really even watch them. I mean, it was really, this guy, just, you could not see his movies. His movies really had been released a little bit here, a little bit there. The most well-known movie in the U.S. was Invitation to Hell, which was released on VHS in that kind of iconic, difficult to find VHS cover. But he was a real obscure filmmaker. And in the early 2000s, The Invitation to Hell and The Last Night, it's kind of like a double feature, like two 50, 60-minute films together. They were re-released on DVD, and there was the inklings that movies were going to come out. There was this website for Sarcophilius Films, and like, what is Sarcophilius Films? And it was all of these other movies were teased. These sword and sorcery films, like Atlantis, like things that he had made, like Atlantis and Avalon, and all these other movies. And they never really came out on DVD. It was like, really, you couldn't even look at these titles on the IMDb. They didn't even have a listing on the IMDb. So, really interesting, obscure filmmaker, almost like a serial filmmaker. This guy who just goes off and does these movies over and over, and just keeps pushing, keeps going for it. And the films themselves, you know, I mean, as I said, most of the features were 16 millimeter. He did do a couple of Super 8. I mean, I think he did at least one Super 8 feature, and that was Bloodstream, which I think he made after Invitation to Hell. He got ripped off by the distributors, and so he made a movie called Bloodstream, where it's about a horror film director who gets ripped off by distributors and then goes and kills the film distributor and the distributor's family. It was like a real kind of like just trying to get it out of his system. And I think that was shot on Super 8, and I don't think he ever really wanted to release that. That was just a fun thing to do. But I mean, obscure filmmaker, until very recently, where the Merlin Films International YouTube page has come out, and you can actually watch all of his movies. And it's like I don't think I've ever seen a YouTube page that's this much of a dump of a filmmaker's life. It's just this filmmaker's his output is all on the page, full of videos, full of incredible stuff, and it's weird because it's like they show. I think one of his best movies was Death Run in the late 80s. It's like a post-apocalyptic movie, and I'm going to do a full review of Death Run, but. There's like a 4:3 copy of Death Run. There's a 16:9 version of Death Run. There's the Thai dub. It was released in Thailand, and you know, so all these different versions, different Spanish dubs of movies, all kind of these different versions of films. It's a really great place to go and watch this guy develop as a filmmaker. All his student short films, his early films, his feature films, all of this stuff is great. So highlights in this guy's career, because I mean, he made so many movies. You know, what should you check out? I would suggest, of course, you know, the early films. As I said, the Last Night and Invitation to Hell. Those are really good. Death Run, I think, is a great movie. Avalon and Atlantis, which are kind of his peplum type, sword and sorcery type movies. Atlantis it looks like a huge movie. I mean, it really looks like a big movie. It's great. He made this movie called Torment, which is like this thing, this expose on the music industry and all this stuff. I don't know, there's so many movies to talk about. So many movies he made. Scare, which was like this, like a horror film, which he shot twice. He did a lot of things with shooting like demo versions, early versions, and then shooting multiple different versions. He shot like 3 or 4 different versions of Tristan, and doing different like sword and sorcery Tristan adaptations. So there's all the different versions of Tristan there, and then Scare. There's the second version of Scare they shot, I guess, on digital video in the early 2000s, and then there's some early 2000s stuff there. And there's a lot of trailers, there's short films. It's such an interesting archive of a filmmaker. And then there's also these little interviews with Michael J. Murphy, and I think they're doing a documentary series on Michael J. Murphy called Murphy's Lore, or Murphy's Gold, Murphy's Lore. And it's just such a great, interesting resource. So I think if you're interested in finding out about filmmakers you didn't know about, an interesting filmmaker who made some really interesting films, and well-made films, I think these are well-made movies, then you need to check out the Michael J. Murphy YouTube page, the Merlin Films International. I think it's a great resource, and there's a lot of cool stuff there. So there it is, Michael J. Murphy, an incredible filmmaker, passed away, unfortunately, but his work really still lives on and is still garnering. Now it'll garner thousands and thousands of views on YouTube as everyone can kind of finally watch these films after so many years of like a little obscure VHS release in the US or in Greece, or television in the UK, or Japanese VHS release that kind of goes into nowhere. Now it's all on YouTube, it's all available, and I think that's really incredible.
On behalf of the motion picture industry, welcome to the world of home video entertainment.